In this video, we're going to talk about literary styles within the Bible. There are three main categories of narrative, poetry, and discourse. Now, all three styles need to be approached differently when we read them. The first step is identifying what literary style you're reading within the Bible. It should be noted that some of the books can switch styles throughout. So the easiest way to identify poetry is because it's rhythmic in writing. And sometimes it is indented differently. Other times that means that it's from the Old Testament, but most of the time that means it's poetry. Now, narrative makes up 43% of the scripture, so that's what you're going to encounter most of the time. And that is simply storytelling, outlining the people and the actions in a specific time period and what took place. Discourse is like letters in the New Testament and the sermons throughout Scripture. Discourse is when someone is making a logical argument about a specific topic. When Peter preached at Pentecost or in front of the Sanhedrin, for example. Now, we don't have time to go into all the specifics of how you should approach each literary style, so we're going to stick to the basics and the big picture. When I look up a verse in the Bible, the first thing I do is zoom out and look at the surrounding verses and chapters, and also ask, what book of the Bible am I in? Am I in Psalms? Then it's probably poetry that I'm reading. Am I in Corinthians? Then it's discourse or a letter. Now, don't freak out if you don't know that stuff off the top of your head. If you have a study Bible, then it will tell you at the beginning of that book what that genre of book is. If you don't have a study Bible, do a quick search for biblical genre of X book of the Bible, and then get off your phone and go back to Scripture. Now, with poetry, there is a lot of richness to Hebrew poetry that I just don't have time to go into today. So for our purposes, read the entire passage or the entire chapter. Just like the line, "Two roads diverge in a yellow wood," doesn't mean much without the entire poem. "He leads me beside still waters" needs all of Psalm 23 to make sense. So when you hear a verse in Psalms, take the time to read the whole chapter to understand the fuller picture the psalmist was communicating with their writings. Now, discourse is similar to poetry in that you want to read a whole sermon or a letter to best understand what the author was communicating to the whole people, instead of just a section. Now, if I'm in a passage that's a narrative, then I want to understand the surrounding passages. What is happening around that time of the specific verse that I'm looking at? Who are the people involved? What events have already taken place and what happens after? Now, you may be thinking, man, I don't know if I have the time to read the Bible with this level of intentionality. This seems like a lot of work. But I'm going to encourage you to resist that temptation. My hope is that this would actually cause you to lean in when you're reading Scripture. The Bible is a deep, rich well. It is sharper than a two-edged sword, living and active, relevant to our lives no matter the season. And it is meant to be meditated on for a lifetime within the context of community. And that is my encouragement for you today. Read Scripture in community. It could be as simple as texting a verse to friends that stood out to you and just kind of saying, this is what stuck out to me. Or it could be getting together for coffee and discussing a passage of Scripture together. Whatever it is, Scripture is not meant to be studied in isolation. So in this new year, let's focus on meditating on Scripture day and night and doing it in community.